Tonight on Bridge City News, Canadians stranded on a cruise ship with the coronavirus are coming home soon. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau canceled his trip to the Caribbean to deal with the pipeline blockades which have been crippling our oil and gas sectors. And Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf stops by our studio to discuss how the province is trying to get its financial house in order.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Canadians stranded on board a quarantine cruise ship in Japan have been told that they will be brought home on Thursday. Passengers will be informed of the exact departure time around 24 hours before the flight from Tokyo. As many as 255 Canadians are on the Diamond Princess, where close to 3,500 passengers have been stuck for at least 10 days. So far, 355 people have been infected with the coronavirus, including 32 from Canada. Canadian Health Minister Patty Hajdu says the efforts of our military and civilian personnel helping the more than 400 people quarantined at CFB Trenton is a sign of Canadian unity. The Canadians and their relatives left the center of the novel coronavirus outbreak in China and are waiting out the illness's incubation period.
Oftentimes when there's a new virus on the scene, when there's a crisis in our community or in our country, the tendency can be that we pull apart. But Canadians continually remind me that what we're really good at is standing together for each other, and that we're stronger when we work together. And when we're able to put aside our differences, small or large, to get through crises, to get through trying times, that's when we're the most Canadian.
American officials are also dealing with cruise ship passengers who are under quarantine. They were brought to a national quarantine unit in Nebraska.
We were asked to bring some individuals here, individuals who had either tested positive or had a high likelihood of testing positive because of symptoms they were exhibiting. These individuals were brought here because we have the personnel, we have the facilities, we have the resources and the expertise to handle these kind of individuals.
Businesses in many Asian communities in Canada have been negatively affected by the coronavirus. Businesses have also seen a sharp decline in the United States amid fears about the viral outbreak which originated in China.
Well, in the neighborhood, it's just been an obvious drop in foot traffic, definitely less tourists, and just people in general because they're afraid to come out. This restaurant's been around since the 1920s. I used to come here when I was a kid all the time. Is everything okay? It didn't take me by surprise that business would drop, but it took me by surprise by how much. I think roughly about 40% for us. Yeah, and usually at this time we're pretty much packed and there's usually a line out the door, but it hasn't been like that for the past few weeks.
More than 150 million Chinese are now under lockdown in China. The death toll from the coronavirus now stands at 1,868 people, with more than 72,000 people infected. In light of the worsening spread of the coronavirus, Christians around the world are being urged to pray for the churches in Wuhan, China, as the epidemic has a major impact on their lives. Steve Fouch, with the London-based Christian Medical Fellowship, says the epidemic will restrict the ability of churches to gather there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously any big social gathering is going to be a challenge, and one of the things that they have done in China is they've shut down almost all the big social gathering places, big sporting events, and of course there was the Chinese Lunar New Year very recently, and virtually nothing was done as a consequence of that because everybody was being encouraged to stay home. So of course that has an impact on churches meeting, home groups getting together. So the chance for fellowship is probably going to be somewhat curtailed for many Christians, and a lot of people will be having to just stay in the family home. And so it'd be good to pray for the Christians there who will be deprived of fellowship to some extent, that they would find encouragement in the Lord and that they would know that there were other believers around and be able to keep in some kind of contact with one another for spiritual support during that time, because it is going to be difficult for them to gather.
The National Chief of the Assembly First Nations is calling for calm to ease tensions over a BC pipeline project and the protests it has spawned. Perry Bellegarde says governments and industry have to give everyone time and space to work with the Wet'suwet'en people. The First Nations hereditary chiefs opposed the natural gas pipeline through their traditional territory, even though it has been approved from elected band councils.
We say we want to de-escalate and we want dialogue. And I say our people are taking action because they want to see action. And when they see positive action by the key players, when they see a commitment to real dialogue to address this difficult situation, people will respond in a positive way. They'll respect the need to give everyone time and space for that dialogue to happen. And going forward, this will be a clear sign that, of course, we need a new approach. When governments ignore First Nations rights, title, jurisdiction, it creates conflict and court cases. But when governments respect First Nations rights and title, it's a path to peace, progress, and prosperity.
Since the RCMP moved in to enforce an injunction at the worksite, protests have shut down rail traffic and blocked streets and ports across the country. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau emerged from a meeting saying he wants a quick and peaceful resolution to anti-pipeline protests that have devastated Canada's rail service. While he spoke of the impact it's having on our economy, he did not offer any specifics on his government's plan to address it.
We had a good meeting this morning of the Incident Response Group, discussions with ministers. I made some phone calls to Indigenous leadership as well as to a number of premiers. I understand how worrisome this is for so many Canadians and difficult for many people and families across the country. We're going to continue to focus on resolving this situation quickly and peacefully, and that's what we're going to do.
Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller said he has made progress with protesters after having difficult conversations about the protest of a pipeline crossing into Wet'suwet'en territory in BC. He says he's taking those concerns to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
The progress was modest. We talked openly. Frankly, this needs to be done expeditiously, but there's a number of issues that need to get resolved. Out of respect for the team in the room that spent hours, we did get a chance to eat and talk. I've had some great conversations, but some very tough ones, some very serious ones, and that's what I'm going to take back to the Prime Minister and Cabinet tonight, and move forward in respect and peace. There's a lot of more work to be done, and I have a few messages that I need to go back to the Prime Minister, who I'll be reaching out to tonight, and discussing with my Cabinet about what the next steps are.
Business groups are calling on the government to resolve the anti-pipeline blockades as soon as possible. Dennis Darby, who's head of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, says hundreds of millions of dollars worth of goods are getting backed up and layoffs could start soon if the situation is not resolved.
The blockade must end and rail service has to be restored as soon as possible. It's time for the federal government and the Prime Minister, to really lead, to find a solution. And the actions over the weekend by Minister Miller and the Incident Response Group, these are all important and positive steps, but they're only steps. And it's impossible to quantify completely the exact cost of the Canadian economy. We know that manufacturers don't have much time before the impact becomes dire. So we're asking the government to put together a relief program, emergency funding to help Canadians affected by this. For immediate assistance for laid off workers because of stoppages, cost recovery for businesses who incur extra costs and penalties. We stand ready as CME to be part of an emergency business caucus along with other leading business trade associations to advise and coordinate the government.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, the province is looking at cutting public sector wages to help get the provincial debt under control. That has not sat well with AUPE President Guy Smith, who says the 1% cut will really hurt Albertans. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf says that's not true. He says the union is using that as a negotiating tactic.
They have the right to protest and make their feelings known. They do that very well. They have a loud voice. We are not killing people. I think everybody realizes that's a little bit of over-the-top language. We are negotiating through some tough times. They haven't seen raises in a lot of years, and they're making that known. But again, we've been very clear for a while with the fiscal situation of the province. We are going for 0 raises, and we are the highest paid jurisdiction in the country.
Catch the full interview with Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf as he also discusses Premier Kenney's comments about phasing Alberta out of the energy sector. That's coming up after business news. The trial of Gary Lippa began in Lethbridge today. He was charged with sexual assault of a minor. BCN's Loris Alexander was at the Lethbridge courthouse with the latest.
How 39-year-old Gary James Lippa stood in court for trial today. Lippa was accused of assaulting and luring a 13-year-old child back in 2017. The Crown is expected to call in 10 witnesses before defense begins its case.
A hotel built 116 years ago burned down over the weekend in Pincher Creek. The historic King Edward Hotel went up in flames early Saturday morning. Flames were visible from the top floor of the hotel around 4 a.m. on Saturday. Fire officials say 10 people were inside when the fire erupted and were safely evacuated. An investigation into the fire is underway. According to a Facebook post by the Kootenai Brown Pioneer Village, the owner of the hotel had been working to restore it. Streets Alive Mission will be hosting the annual Coldest Night of the Year walk in Lethbridge this Saturday, February 22nd. The event looks to bring awareness to homelessness and help raise money for local charities.
It is a walkathon to raise awareness and funds for the homeless and for the poverty stricken here in Lethbridge. So the funds raised here will stay here. Those funds will be put into the programs that we run. They'll go into helping with the food bank. We have an emergency food bank that'll go into the dinner program that we run 7 days a week. It'll go into the pin bank and definitely be here for supports for the people that we serve.
This year, participants will walk around the Evangelical Free Church in Lethbridge. For more information about the walk, you can visit Streets Alive online. The Sphere program team at Lethbridge College will be receiving an award from the province for their work in real-life healthcare training environments. The honor will be presented to them by the Alberta Colleges and Faculties Association in May.
We were nominated and selected for the award. We received news last week. It's a provincial award from a CFA for innovation in teaching. We have 2 high-fidelity adult mannequins, like the one that you see featured here, and we use those primarily with our nursing programs, the practical nurse program and the bachelor nursing programs, to support different scenarios that they work on during their nursing education.
The Sphere team will be receiving a $1,500 award and the Lethbridge College Faculty Association $500. February is Heart Month across Canada. There are currently close to 2.5 million Canadians who suffer from heart disease. Canadians are encouraged to learn more about risk factors and make one change to improve their heart health. BCN's Loris Alexander was at Orange Theory Fitness to find out what has locals' hearts pumping.
Because we focus on heart rate-based interval training and it's such a staple of what we do, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, North America wide, partner a lot with Orange Theory Fitness, and a lot of it is just simply for awareness.
Regular exercise can lower heart disease risk factors like blood pressure and stress.
I'm learning to pace my heart, which was all over the place before, so it's consistently improving my panic attacks. I have less depression and less panic attacks. My PTSD is lower. My doctor hasn't had to increase my medications, so it's definitely bringing me more life.
It gives me energy and I feel more alive. Like when I work out in the morning, I can do much more in the day, or when I work out right now at 1 p.m., I can do much more. I can be more productive. I don't know, I feel happier and I feel fresher, I feel lighter, and I feel like I'm doing something productive. So that's why I work out.
A healthy diet and sleeping at least 7 to 9 hours a night consistently has also been shown to lower the risk of heart disease.
The most important one would be that sleep pattern. You want to get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night to allow for optimal recovery. And again, that's going to vary depending on how much you're doing in the day before. Next is going to be that nutrition. Okay, we put milligram quantities of medicines in our body, and those have some side effects, things like that. That affects our body system.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Alberta Health Services has new programs beginning to help those who live in the Medicine Hat region deal with chronic pain. The 6-week series called Better Choices, Better Health offers free workshops to help those who have chronic pain. They'll be held Wednesdays from 1 p.m. till 3:30 p.m. beginning February 26th at the Medicine Hat Family Leisure Centre. If you'd like more information, you can call them toll-free at 1-866-795-9709. Cannabis, it's a plant that many Canadians use for health reasons, including pain control. But what about the side effects? Jacqueline Smith is the Director of Mental Health and Wellness in the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Calgary. She says people really need to do proper research and educate themselves before even considering using cannabis.
You have to be a very informed consumer. You have to be very, very careful about the research. I can tell you that there's a lot of profiteering going on, and that panacea effect, there's people making a lot of money on products, topical as an example, creams for your skin, for There's no strong evidence to suggest that these products are actually effective, but people are paying a lot of money for these products.
Professor Smith will have more on the pros and cons of using cannabis coming up after business news. For many Toronto Blue Jays fans, this is a very exciting time. Spring training is about to begin in Dunedin, Florida. One Blue Jay has been quite outspoken about the scandal involving the Houston Astros. Shortstop Bo Bichette thinks the Astros players involved in the sign-stealing scandal should have received harsher punishment from Major League Baseball.
Well, first off, I'm glad that I wasn't directly impacted by it. I definitely think that those guys that were, there's so many people, not just the Astros, not just the Dodgers, but not just Judge. There's so many, guys who got hit hard for an inning, all that. So I'm glad it's not me directly impacted, but I don't necessarily think that cheating is bad for the game. I think the way that it was handled is probably bad for the game. The fact that those guys aren't getting in trouble, I guess, per se.
It's anything but baseball weather right now, isn't it? The snow has finally ended, however, and the milder temperatures are on the horizon. Complete weather details are coming up. We had clouds and light flurries again today. Fortunately, the snow has stopped and warmer temperatures are on the horizon. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the mercury is finally starting to climb.
Yeah, Hal, just blame it on our crazy Alberta weather that's kind of zigzagging all over the place from minuses to pluses. But good news, yes, you are right. We are going to see some plus temperatures later on this week. We went from -1 being the high earlier today, Tuesday. Tonight's overnight low will be -10, but it will feel like a -15 to -23 because of that wind chill. We're going to have gusts up to 40 km/h. And then into Wednesday, we're going to start to see sunshine for the rest of the week and get into those plus temperatures that we love so much. 7 degrees for Wednesday, 8 for Thursday, 6 is the high for Friday, lots of sunshine. And then we're going to get some clouds again for the weekend with a high of 4 on Saturday and dropping to -1 on Sunday with a chance of flurries. Now the almanac highs have actually increased a little bit to 2 degrees being the average high for this time of year. The average low -10. The highest temperature recorded on this day was 14 degrees. That was back in 1943, and the lowest temperature recorded on this day was 1986. It was a chilly -33. Now the sun rose this morning at 7:37 a.m. and it set at 5:54 p.m. So we can really see those days getting longer now. And now we're going to take a look at the highs across the nation. Lots of sunshine on the west coast tomorrow. Highs of 9 degrees in Victoria. Vancouver will see a high of 8 degrees tomorrow. Sunshine across Alberta, high of -1 in Edmonton, and 0 will be the high tomorrow in Calgary. Same thing for the rest of the prairies, just tons and tons of sunshine. As Saskatchewan and Manitoba are kind of experiencing one of those polar vortexes with the clear blue skies, but it brings lots of cold air. -13 for Saskatoon, same thing for Regina, and a chilly -18 is the high over in Winnipeg. Now over in the more eastern part of the country here, we're going to see chances of flurries across Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa. -1 the high in Toronto, -5 in Ottawa, and -4 over in Montreal. Now in Atlantic Canada, we're going to see a mix of precipitation, snow, and also rainfall. 4 degrees is the high tomorrow in Fredericton. Halifax should see a high of 5. Chance of showers, rain also expected over in Charlottetown tomorrow. 4 degrees is the high and 5 for St. John's with rain showers as well there. There you go, Hal. There is your forecast.
There could be huge financial consequences for farmers as backed up rail lines are hampering producers' ability to export commodities. Now that's according to Mary Robinson, who's the Canadian Federation of Agriculture president. She says rail service disruptions can also have negative impacts on animal welfare issues as propane shipments are crucial to keeping barns heated during the wintertime. A spokesperson with the Canadian Propane Association says wholesalers in the Maritimes have already begun to ration distribution. Meanwhile, in Sarnia, Ontario, truck lineups are up to 10 hours long as hospitals, farmers, and rural residents await more shipments. 3 proxy advisory firms are recommending shareholders approve a plan to take Hudson's Bay Company private. The shareholder vote is set for next Thursday. The retailer says all 3 recommend that HBC shareholders back a sweetened offer from a shareholder group headed by Executive Chairman Richard Baker. The deal needs at least 75% of the votes cast by all shareholders and a simple majority of votes by minority shareholders. Air Canada is reporting a fourth quarter profit of $152 million. That is up from a net loss of $360 million in the same quarter of 2018. It is warning, however, that its first quarter will be hurt by the suspension of flights to China and Hong Kong due to the coronavirus. First quarter earnings are also expected to be affected by the continued grounding of its fleet Boeing 737 MAX jets and increased maintenance and pension costs. Walmart is reporting disappointing fourth quarter sales and profits of $4.14 billion US after a shortened holiday shopping season. Revenue rose just over 2% to $140.6 billion. That was shy of the $141.5 billion Wall Street was looking for. Online sales rose 35%, which was weaker than the 41% booked in the previous quarter. Walmart also delivered a weak profit forecast for the year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 10 points on the day to 17,858. The Dow was down 166 points to 29,232. The S&P 500 was down 10 points to 3370. The Nasdaq was up almost 2 points to 9732. Oil was up 7 cents to 52.12 per barrel. Natural gas was up 13 cents to $1.97. Gold was up 45 cents to $16.0206 an ounce, and silver was up a penny to $18.18 an ounce. Wheat is at $224 per metric ton. Barley is also at $224. Canola is at $461, and corn is at $259 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 60 cents on the day to $122. Feeder cattle were up 78 cents to $139.55. Lean hogs were up $1.20 to $65.85. And the Canadian dollar was unchanged on the day at 75.42 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Canadians stranded on board a quarantined cruise ship in Japan have been told that they will be brought home on Thursday. Passengers will be informed of the exact departure time around 24 hours before the flight from Tokyo. As many as 255 Canadians are on the Diamond Princess, where close to 3,500 passengers have been stuck for at least 10 days. So far, 355 people have been infected with the coronavirus, including 32 from Canada. AUPE President Guy Smith has gone on record saying Premier Kenney is hurting Albertans by trimming public sector wages. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf disagrees and has details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Pitcher Butte Trinity Church is hosting a play entitled Amazing Grace, the story of John Newton, on Friday, February 21st at 7 p.m. Enjoy this solo performance featuring Deanna Storfy from Acting Up Drama, as she brings to life the true story behind one of the most popular and recognized hymns of the 20th and 21st centuries. Tickets are $10 and can be purchased by calling Sandra at 403-732-4787. Come for a fun evening filled with musical entertainment to the Lethbridge Community Brass Choir's Brass Day Concert, featuring international trumpet soloist and jazz artist Rex Richardson on Saturday, February 29th, beginning at 7 p.m. at College Drive Community Church. Tickets are $15 and free for children under 12. Purchase yours today at CASA or visit lcbs.yapcity.com. For details, go to lcbs.ca. The Kinsman Club of Lethbridge invites you to their 6th annual Mardi Gras Charity Gala on Saturday, March 14th at the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge. The evening begins at 5 p.m., where you can enjoy the ambiance of the French Quarter, which will also feature a 5-course Cajun meal, games and entertainment, a silent auction, dance, and much more. Early bird tickets are $72 and can be purchased at eventbrite.ca. Proceeds to go towards the Ready, Set, Go Back to School Fair. For details, visit the Kinsman Club of Lethbridge's Facebook page. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf is our special guest here today, here to discuss provincial politics and issues that impact us right here in southwestern Alberta. Nathan, welcome back to BCN.
It's great to be here, Hal. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's jump right into it.
You bet.
Big protest at the Chinook Regional Hospital. The AUPE was there. A lot of the union members are not happy. The public sector wage cuts. And some of the union members we talked to say, you know what? Jason Kenney is killing Albertans. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think it's part of union negotiations. They have the right to protest and make their feelings known. They do that very well. They have a loud voice. We are not killing people. I think everybody realizes that's a little bit of over-the-top language. We are negotiating through some tough times. They haven't seen raises in a lot of years, and they're making that known. But again, We've been very clear for a while with the fiscal situation of the province. We're going for 0 raises, and we are the highest paid jurisdiction in the country.
Was there also a 1% wage cut, and the union's asking for a 2.5% increase?
Exactly.
So that's quite a gap, isn't it?
It is and it's not. Again, it's part of the negotiating process. Each side puts their stake in the ground, and we see this go through the process, the to and fro, and normally it ends up somewhere in the middle. We have seen that. Again, we've been very clear in our position that the end result we're looking for is 0 change, to let some of the rest of the country catch up to the levels that we're at, see some of that parity. And we absolutely want to respect doctors, nurses, and all public sector employees for the work that they do.
But 2.5%, doesn't that seem fairly reasonable, though? With
I think,
inflation and...
well, that's a tough spot. And within context, the province, we have a $60 going on $70 billion debt. $7 billion deficit each year that's been cumulative for quite a number of years. Somehow, some way, in the big scheme of things, we have to stop that slide. And this is one of the ways that we have to be responsible with the money that we have.
Now, Union President Guy Smith also came out and said, you know what, Kenny's just basically attacking us. He doesn't really care so much for the public sector workers. How do you respond to those comments?
I think absolutely untrue. My wife is a nurse, and I know a lot of incredible teachers, doctors, public sector workers. They do it from the goodness of their heart, and they really care about the people they serve, work very, very hard. The fact is, government doesn't have any control over private sector wages. We've seen huge decreases in that, huge unemployment. The one sector where the government has authority is on public sector. So that's who we negotiate with, but it doesn't mean that we disrespect the service that they provide.
And how much of the budget is that as well?
It's a huge part of the budget.
More than 50%?
No, but
Close to?
the public sector wages is, it's a vast majority. I think somewhere around 40% of the entire budget across all ministries would end up in wages, yeah.
Premier Kenny announced recently that the government will be divesting from the crude by rail contracts signed by the NDP last year and offloading the contracts to the private sector. Can you really explain to our viewers how this works?
Sure. These contracts were signed right during the campaign period, very poorly contemplated by the previous government. They were going to result in huge billion-dollar losses, multi-billion-dollar losses for the province. And it was not reasonable for us to take on that risk as a government. Private industry, a lot of business is done on the basis of risk and reward. And with the negotiations of the current Minister of Finance, he was able to secure private industry to buy those off of the government, really minimizing that loss to the taxpayer and ultimately save some money for Albertans. Even though there's still a loss, it was much less than it could have been.
Let's talk about some of the blockades here, which has really been disrupting rail traffic. You know, the gas link, the protests, the protesters through the Wet'suwet'en Nation in northern BC. How much is that impacting us here in southwestern Alberta, especially getting our grain to market?
It is. It's going to have an increasing cumulative effect with CN stopping shipment to a huge section of eastern Canada. There's going to be many industries that are going to feel the impact of that. And it is very unfortunate when we have the rule of law being completely ignored, not just by the protesters, but unfortunately by our police service. Why are they not enforcing the rule of law? It's a very, very dangerous place for Canada to be when you're basically saying anarchy and chaos is okay.
Premier Kenny actually surprised some people recently when he came out and said, eventually Alberta will have to phase itself out of the oil and gas industry, I think by the year 2050 or so, because of climate change. That shocked a lot of people. Alberta, we're all about oil and gas here for the most part. I mean, down here it's a lot of agriculture. Yeah. But Nathan, how are you gonna basically come up with the extra cash? You know, when you're talking about billions upon billions of dollars, where's that extra revenue going to come from?
Well, I think his words are maybe magnified more so than what he said. He did clarify to caucus that it is a natural resource. By definition, it's limited, and at some point in time, it won't be there anymore. But we are really taking a lead in terms of our tier fund, technology and innovation for that, so that we can invest in the future and where we go from here. It's going to take time. It's going to be a transition. We're talking decades and decades, not tomorrow. I think we're doing it in a responsible way and providing the funds to help invest into that future.
Will there be more money put into green technology, the agricultural industry?
So, like I said, this is over decades. I'm not sure exactly. A lot of innovation technology will speak to that. Obviously, agriculture, it does not matter how long we're going to be around. A renewable resource that we all need is food. So that will be one. It's something that we're known for. It's something I speak on in the legislature all the time, is the world-class agricultural sector that we have here in southern Alberta.
Okay, let's talk now about the Tech Frontier mine, the big oil sands project here. Still waiting on the feds, you know, whether or not they're going to allow grant approval on this massive project. How important is Tech Frontier to our economy here in Alberta?
Well, it would certainly be a massive help. $20 billion investment over a multiple number of years, 7,700 jobs. This would be a really great thing to have us going. I think the biggest concern, again, is just the fabric of our nation. The Liberal government's put in guidelines and rules of what they require for any kind of development to proceed. Tech has spent like 9 years on this and checked every single box, including committing to net zero by 2050. So does a rule of law govern or does it not? Because if it doesn't, again, one more factor that says, what rules are we following here? And who's going to enforce it? And is it right for you to put out these rules and then change it when you get to the goal line? Very, very concerning for Alberta, and our response will be significant if we don't see the rule of law win.
How about TMX and the fact that we're finally going to get shovels into the ground here, creating more jobs and revenue for the Alberta economy? How important is that?
That is, it's of paramount importance for Alberta right now. We have a resource, we've got to get it to market. That's a pretty basic principle. We have a glut that forces our price down when we can't get it there. Once we increase that capacity, we should see that price start to stabilize and increase. That's good for every Albertan. It's good for jobs, and it's responsible. I mean, again, we've seen more rail cars spill just because of the length of train and the amount of product they've got to do. By far, the most economically and environmentally friendly way to do that is through pipelines.
As you know, in the last federal election, the Liberals were shut out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. A lot of people are not happy with the federal Liberals and Justin Trudeau here in this province. He does have some support, but for the most part, you know, it's not as popular. So what about Western separatists when you keep hearing that? You know, all the events you're at, right?
Yes.
Representing Lethbridge as an MLA, the Western separatist movement, the Wexit movement. Tell me about some of that and how you talk to people.
Again, it's a frustration that's simmering. We've seen it ebb and flow over the years, potentially and most often politically grounded. But we're seeing that rise again and again. If the decisions go against Alberta for no discernible legal reason, man, it really flares up. People have a right to be frustrated. They are expressing that frustration. We are trying to strengthen their voice with the federal government and realize that the federal government has an obligation to the nation, to national unity, to represent every region fairly and equitably. We feel that hasn't been done. We are trying to strengthen that voice and remain one country. I'm very, very proud to wear the Canadian flag when I travel anywhere in the world. We have a truly incredible history that is recognized by much of the globe, and we want to see that work in community. But when things happen like this, it really puts that to the test.
How about investment in southwestern Alberta, in particular Lethbridge here? How can we get more businesses to want to open up shop here in our city?
I think we're doing that. I think that's part of the success story of the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction. I think limiting government and government interference that we've talked about, allowing businesses to work within a good structural framework. There's freedom within that framework when we allow businesses to do what they need to do. And I think that's we're seeing that red tape reduction removed from them. And then the other thing that we have to do here in the South is make sure that we're recognized and known for the great things that we do, the resources, the collaboration, the cooperation that we have. We really set a high bar for those measures.
What about the supervised consumption site? A lot of people are asking, is the province going to be shutting it down here in Lethbridge or moving it? What's the latest?
I don't have any specific news. We're going into a budget cycle. So some of that will be released very, very shortly. The budget will be released on February 27th. And with that, I believe very shortly thereafter, the report on the supervised consumption sites from the panel. So it is coming, and the end is very in sight to where we're going, the plan moving forward by the province.
Drug and gang violence is getting out of control here in our city. Recently, we had a shooting, our first homicide in the last 2 years. You know, somebody from Toronto came here, shot a 35-year-old guy. What are we doing about the crime, specifically in our region here?
Yeah, I'm very pleased that the Minister of Justice has been down to Lethbridge a number of times. Just recently, again, met with some of our judges as well as the city. His plans to help have a drug court in Lethbridge. We're expecting some of those announcements again, along with the budget, some of that directive and initiative for rural crime, putting boots to the ground is being unrolled this year. So really proud of his initiative and his work on that front to help support our police officers as their frontline work in that area.
How about even preventing the drugs coming into our region?
Yeah, that's the other option.
Game plan together, right?
Yeah, that's the other option that he's talked about, that expanding the mandate for alert, which is the police force dedicated to shutting down organized crime. They've seen a lot of success around the province, and he has been looking into providing that service down in southern Alberta. So again, something to look forward to when the budget is unrolled.
Scan unit as well? Any
Scan
potential
unit is a little different. Scan unit has a much more specific mandate. And that funding doesn't seem to be available at this time. But again, with the...
And those scanned units shut down the drug houses, right?
That's right.
Specifically.
Where
With
Alert...
Alberta Sheriffs?
Yeah, where Alert does a little bit more. We might be expanding what Alert can do to include some of that. We might be expanding the presence of Alert in Lethbridge and southern Alberta. And then they are doing what you're talking about, actually going to the source, stopping that inflow, hitting organized crime at the source. And I think we can see just as much, if not more, benefit that way.
Let me ask you something. You and Shannon Phillips, I mean, you're with UCP, she's the NDP. You guys go to different events together, shaking hands, kissing babies, you know, meeting a lot of your constituents.
Yeah.
But tell me about, there's got to be a little bit of friction there sometimes as well. She's from the far left, you're on the right.
Yeah.
You know, you have to meet in the middle, I guess, right?
Well, we have a very good discourse on different ideas. She is a highly intelligent person representing her constituents and viewpoint. I take a different direction, obviously, different parties. We've had...
But still intelligent.
Still intelligent, I
Yes.
hope. We've had a number of great conversations. It doesn't happen in the legislature as often as maybe people would like.
I was going to say, aren't there any fireworks at the ledge in Edmonton when you guys go up there?
Well, it's different in the legislature. Particularly, a question period is set up to ask questions of ministers and ministries.
Okay.
I am not, and neither is she, so I have no opportunity to ask her questions, and she would not have an opportunity to ask me.
How about bringing forth a private member's bill, you know, then?
That's right, but you have to be, you're drawn out a hat for that, so right. I'm not made the list at this point.
Okay.
So there are other times during debate where you can share opposing viewpoints on the same topic. That's not necessarily seen as well, but for the most part, we have a very professional relationship, serving a lot of the same people. And I think some good constructive debates can happen at different times. Good dialogue. Yeah, just different times and places.
That's right. Nathan Newdorf, Lethbridge East MLA with UCP. Thanks a lot for joining me in studio here today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Hal.
Now that cannabis is legal in Canada, more people are using it for health reasons. How effective is it, and what are some of the health risks associated with it? Joining me now to talk about it via Skype from Calgary is Professor Jacqueline Smith, Director of Mental Health and Wellness in the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Calgary. Jacqueline, welcome to BCN.
Thank you. Great to be with you today.
So what are some of the benefits of using cannabis for medical treatment? I know some people use it for pain relief. Are there other potential benefits?
Well, what I do want to say, cannabis has been around for a long time, but because it was an illegal product for so long, there was minimal research. So we are starting to do some research, but it is still in the early phase. What we do know that is cannabis now is being recommended for pain associated with palliative care. So those who are, again, palliative. Also for nausea and vomiting in relation to chemotherapy.
for spasticity, for multiple sclerosis. And just recently, in the last couple of years, it's now being used for treatment-resistant epilepsy in children.
Wow. I have members of my family who are seniors who like to use it for their fibromyalgia and their osteoarthritis. Your thoughts?
Well, cannabis is a very complex compound, and there's lots of different cannabinoids associated with that. So I think the research right now is very, very interesting because they're starting to isolate some of those compounds. And I have heard in research that there is an anti-inflammatory property to it. My caution is, again, this is early research, and you have to have a really critical eye when you're looking at research, because some research, they do it with small participants, number of participants. Some research is not being replicated. We're not seeing random control trials as well too. So I'm concerned there's a little bit of a panacea effect right now, and where cannabis is being recommended for everything under the sun. Now, I want to position myself as someone who sits on the fence. On a personal level, I can tell you that one of our daughters was treated for a cannabis use disorder. And, but also my father, who's passed away from cancer, used cannabis for pain control. So again, I think we have to be very cautious. I am a researcher. We did some research with students at the University of Calgary, and we do know that many young people are using cannabis, and they're saying that it's effective for their anxiety, for their depression, and for their sleep, and for their pain. And we don't deny the fact that people are experiencing positive effects, but what we're saying is that also alongside the positive is the potential for risk, because we don't know the long-term consequences of someone who's using a product over a long period that has not been thoroughly researched.
And I've heard students as well, they like to use cannabis and the cannabis oil when they're vaping and their vaping products. But let's talk more about the larger or more growing demographic, and you say it might be seniors?
Yes, we are seeing a rise in the senior population using cannabis. Again, caution, because when you look at some of the effects, the side effects of cannabis use, it can cause some coordination problems, some dizziness. So we do worry about seniors who are using cannabis and may be at risk for falls, not to insult any of their intelligence, but I think what's really important is that when you are seeing a healthcare practitioner, so we have physicians and nurse practitioners who can prescribe it. So when you're seeing them, you want to be sure that they are thorough in going over the side effects and the potential risks, the potential benefits, and looking at some of the contraindications as well for people who are wanting to use cannabis. And there are some, if there's a family history of psychoses or just substance use problems, that is a concern. And of course, very, very strong evidence with cannabis use with those who have a predisposition, again, towards psychoses or schizophrenia. That's very thorough research, and we know that people are at high risk of psychoses or schizophrenia as well if they have a family history of either of those.
So what is it in the cannabis itself, doctor, that provides pain relief? Is it the THC, the CBD?
That's a very, very good question, and one that we really emphasize now when we're educating our university students. A lot of people don't understand that cannabis is, the two main components are THC and CBD. Now, THC is a psychoactive, mind-altering substance, whereas CBD is non-intoxicating. So most of the research, I actually read a systematic review today in preparation for this interview, and it's 2020 January. And what they're saying is that most of the research now is favoring CBD as a potential substance that can help with things like we're talking about, with pain. There's some early research around anxiety as well, social anxiety. I did see research connected to PTSD and to sleep disorders that are associated with PTSD. So again, I'll caution, all of those studies that I just shared with you are early. So again, we have to be very careful when we're looking at the research. The ones that we talked about at the beginning for palliative pain, for spasticity, for the nausea and vomiting, and for the treatment-resistant epilepsy, solid research. But the others that we're talking about now, we have to be careful with.
When I talk to chefs about cooking, a lot of times they say, Hal, the best way to release the lycopenes in the tomatoes is when you cook them instead of eating them raw. And I thought that was interesting. Is it very similar when it comes to cannabis, that people actually smoke the cannabis as opposed to edibles to get the most bang for their buck, so to speak?
Well, that again, you're just bringing up some really great questions. So there's a difference between smoked and edible. One is the effect. So when you smoke or vape, typically you're starting to see an effect within 10 minutes that peaks at 30 minutes. With edibles, sometimes it takes up to 30 minutes to feel the high if you're using the THC, and then that sometimes takes up to 4 hours to peak. So the problem is those who are accustomed to getting that quick high from the smoked cannabis and are then trying the edible, they're, let's say as an example, they'll eat a brownie and within 10 minutes, they're waiting for that high that they normally get from something that was smoked, and they'll eat another one and another one. So that is a concern. In fact, we are seeing data out of Colorado where there's increased visits to emergency now because of intoxicating effects. So basically overdosing on cannabis, and you would see things like psychoses, increased heart rate, paranoia, definitely concerning symptoms. And again, the concern with the edibles is that now we're dealing with children, with pets, and the caution is if we're making an informed decision as adults to use it, we have to be very, very careful with our children who may be curious, or with our pets who just may eat something that fell on the floor. So
yeah, I'm wondering how dangerous that would be for, like you said, your pet or your child, a baby, a toddler, to get a hold of some of the edibles. How toxic that may actually be, how dangerous.
Well, and again, a good point. It can absolutely be dangerous. When we're talking about THC, we're talking about a psychoactive, mind-altering substance. And for pets as well, we're seeing more research where vets are seeing animals coming in with intoxication as well from cannabis products. So I think what's really important to bring out as well is that there's different concentrations of THC in different products. So they can have a level of up to 99% THC, whereas you can get as low as 4 and 5%. On average, we're looking between 30 and 40 concentration levels of THC. So it's, again, I hope what's coming across here is that you have to be a very informed consumer. You have to be very, very careful about the research. I can tell you that there's a lot of profiteering going on, and that panacea effect, there's people making a lot of money on products, topical as an example, creams for your skin, for there's no strong evidence to suggest that these products are actually effective, but people are paying a lot of money for these products. Is there potential for research to prove that they're helpful? Absolutely. But my line is that I think we're flying a plane as we're building it. So we have to be very careful, and you have to know that you can trust your healthcare practitioner, again, that they're doing all the screening questions, they're giving you the risks and the benefits. There's no really standardized dosaging right now as well too. So what they're saying is you want to start low and you want to go slow. And for those who maybe are used to smoking cannabis and are switching over to the edibles, they have to realize they are not going to get the effect as immediate as they would with the inhaled. So there's so many different variables to consider, again, if you're making the decision to use.
One of the stories we had on Bridge City News last week was down in the United States, how people are using CBD oil on their pets, like their dogs. saying how it's helping with their pain and their suffering. What are your thoughts on that, using it on our pets?
I think again, in all areas of cannabis research, it's new. I do research with humans, so I just know that that's another area that we have to be very cautious with. And again, I think there's a potential for profiteering from promoting a substance that's effective when in fact it hasn't been thoroughly researched.
Some say cannabis is not addictive at all, but others say it really can be. What does the science say?
The science says there's absolutely a diagnosis for a cannabis use disorder, and it's found in the diagnostic manual of mental health disorders, and absolutely. And people, I've actually seen the comparison between coming off of cannabis as coming off cigarettes. So there is that withdrawal as well. There's definitely the tolerance as well, where people are starting with smaller concentrations and having to go higher with THC as well, toxic levels to get the benefits. So all the same symptoms of other substance use disorders, and I can definitely tell you. I'm also a clinician who has worked in the area of addiction and mental health, and I've absolutely seen cannabis use disorder amongst youth. And youth is an area that we need to be very, very cautious with, because we know that the brain continues to develop up to the age of 25, even 26. So while the brain is still developing, our youth are at a greater risk of problematic use because of their developing brain. And the research says that the earlier you start and the more frequent you use, the more risk you are of creating of cannabis use disorder or problematic cannabis use. So I think a lot of research, especially from the Canadian Centre of Substance Abuse, they're putting out a lot of literature around caution with young people. And again, we know they're using, in fact, Canadian youth are among the top youth in the world who are smoking cannabis. So we're paying particular attention right now to that.
Are there any potential problems if you consume cannabis edibles along with alcohol or maybe some medications?
Absolutely. We are definitely seeing, if you're consuming alcohol and cannabis, you can potentiate the effect of those two. We do know that we've done a lot of work around impaired driving with alcohol. We're also now having to move forward and look at impairment from cannabis use. And I think we're having to re-educate our young people, because what we do know is the fact that the government has, Health Canada has legalized cannabis. We know now that the perceived risk for young people is going down, and we're seeing a reciprocal effect with that too. So as the perceived risk goes down, use is going up. So the message to a lot of young people is, well, it's legalized, it can't be that bad. So we're really having to do the education again around the CBD, the THC, around the developing brain as well too. And what I do know that our young people are smart, and they want to know what the science is saying. So I think we need to teach our young people to make informed decisions. And I think again, there's a lot of really good research. Canada's lower risk cannabis use guidelines. It's a harm reduction approach. But again, it's giving all the information. It's saying, if you choose to use, these are the things that you should be aware of. So again, giving people the respect and dignity to make the decision and to make it in an informed way as well.
And another thing, when we were talking about some of the long-term detriments or the effects of using cannabis, when you go to the Canada-US border and you want to enter the United States, they ask, have you ever had cannabis? Have you ever smoked pot? If you say yes, good luck getting into the United States right now. That's another danger.
It's true. It's true. I mean, Canada has legalized it federally, and you're seeing across many states in the U.S. They have legalized it in some states, but they have not across the country. So they're protecting their people. I appreciate that.
Professor Jacqueline Smith, Director of Mental Health and Wellness in the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Calgary. Thanks for your time today.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.